Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Now in today's video I'm going to be giving you guys my tips for how to get out of a book slump, and then at the end we're going to do some book recommendations if you are currently in a book slump. So when it comes to reading, it is very common to hit a book slump. Either this can happen just because you have a lot going on in your life and you just haven't been able to read and it took you out of the mood to read, or you have been reading and you either read like a super amazing book and it put you in a slump to where you don't want to read anything else, or you've read some not so great books and it kind of put you in a slump. So I'm going to be giving you guys my tips and recommendations. So I've been reading since I was about 12 was when I got super into reading, and I've had a lot of book slumps in my reading career, I guess. But so it's not uncommon. So if you've been in one, it could have been a few weeks, it could be a couple months, however long. These are kind of just the tips that have worked for me. Again, number one, reading is so subjective, so these tips and recommendations may not work for you, but they may work for somebody else. Same thing with these recommendations. I'm not guaranteeing that these books will pull you out of a book slump. So these are just my tips and recommendations as someone who has been reading for about 8 to 7 years of their life. So number one, give it time. I always tell everybody that whether it's a book slump or any kind of just slump in general, is you just have to give it time. There is not a single reader out there who is always constantly in the mood for reading 24/7, 365 for their entire life. Everyone goes through slumps. Everyone just has a time when, with any hobby in general, sometimes your brain just needs a break from doing the exact same thing, which is reading words on paper. So if you are in a reading slump, give it a bit. Sometimes I always tell people, try doing other things. For me, when I am in book slumps, if I'm not really feeling that in tune with books, I may try doing some of my other hobbies, just something else to kind of take my energy and my time away. Sometimes I just need a kind of book break. And it is really difficult when books play such a huge role in your life. You just have to kind of give it space. Catch up on some TV shows, start a new TV show, catch up on some movies you've been wanting to watch, catch up on some YouTube videos. Maybe you want to do another hobby. Maybe you want to pick up something, or maybe you just want to stare at the wall and contemplate everything. These are all things that are important for the book slump because it gives you time away. If you're in a book slump and you constantly are forcing yourself to try to read, it's going to be so much more difficult. So take a break. Second, when it comes to book slumps, I always recommend rereading a book. Rereading a book that you know you like or you love. It can either be a 5-star, just a book that you know for a fact is just, you know the story, so there's not that suspense. You can kind of anticipate the parts, and when you're reading it, you can be like, okay, I'm gonna read until I get to this one particular chapter or this one part of the book. Kind of stuff like that. I always recommend rereading books that you know for a fact in your heart you love. I don't care if you've read the book 100 times or you're only rereading it for the second time. I always recommend rereading a book to kind of put you back into that mood/headspace. Another tip, if you are trying to sit down and you're trying to open a book and read it, another great idea is to look at audiobooks. Audiobooks are always a great way to read, and yes, they count over here on this channel. Audiobooks count as reading books. Fight me in the comments. I have nothing else better to do with my time. But audiobooks are always a great way. So if you want to do audiobooks, if you have a Spotify premium subscription, you actually get 15 hours included in your subscription for audiobooks, so you're always good to listen to. Audible is a great app where you can sign up. You pay monthly, like a music subscription or anything, but if you want to do kind of a free option in getting audiobooks, you can go through Libby. All you need is a library card, and you can enter that into your Libby account, and you can actually get the audiobooks of the books you want to read, kind of like you're borrowing books, but the audio version as well. So audiobooks are always a great way to focus, do something else with your hands if you're having an issue of sitting there and physically actually reading. Audiobooks are always a great way. I love listening to audiobooks while I'm working out or while I'm in the car, or my other hobby, which is building Legos. I love listening to audiobooks while building and doing something else just with my hands. It could be while I'm playing video games, or it could be while I'm cleaning. Always a great thing as well. Or if you just want to put your headphones in and stare at the wall listening to an audiobook and imagine everything going on in your brain, also a great idea too. Next is, I always recommend, if you don't want to reread a book, read a comfort author, an author that you know for a fact you love and enjoy their books. For me, Emily Henry is always a great option. I've read pretty much all of her books, so I know that if I'm in a book slump and I don't want to reread one of her books, I can always pick up her books because I really enjoy her writing style, kind of the formula. Like, I feel like I know her formula. This could be any author all the way from fantasy to fiction. One tip that I think I always kind of give people is I always enjoy going to the bookstore or the library, or even on your bookshelves, picking up a book that you've heard nothing about. And you may be like, how will that help me get out of a book slump? Like, again, this is personal. Picking up a book that you know absolutely nothing about, you haven't heard people talk about it on Book Talk, Bookstagram, BookTube, whatever. You haven't heard anyone recommend it to you. It's just kind of like a random book that you found that you're like, okay, maybe you're basing it off the cover. Maybe you read the synopsis, or maybe it was a gift and you actually have never heard anything about it. I always recommend reading books that you've never heard anything about, because it gives you that excitement of knowing what it could be. Now, this could be a book that is like a 5-star or a 2-star for you. Going into a book completely blind always, for myself, gives me that kind of like, okay, like what if I read it and it's a 5-star? And it kind of gives you that shock factor all over again. It's kind of like discovering a brand new author, is when you're reading their book and you're like, oh my gosh, I actually really enjoy this. Now, this always has the flip side of you read it and you absolutely don't like it, but I always recommend people doing that. As long as it's in a genre you like, maybe it's a romance book you've heard absolutely nothing about, maybe it's 15 years old, maybe it just came out, because it gives you that excitement feeling when it comes to reading. Kind of my last tip before we get into book recommendations is, on the flip side, is reading brand new releases. If you have a favorite author and one of their new releases is coming out, reading those always helps. Now, you may be in a book slump right now and your favorite author may not release another book till next year, but even just authors that you've rated their books like a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, just books that you've maybe been like, I didn't like absolutely love it, but I did enjoy my time reading it. So now we are going to get into my book recommendations. Now, these are just kind of book recommendations that I think are super fast paced and are great specifically for book slumps. I do have a video out on my channel for my official book recommendations video that breaks it kind of down into genres and all that, and subgenres and everything. So these are books that I personally think are great for book slumps specifically. Number one, we'll start with a fantasy book. Fourth Wing is one of the books that I always recommend that kind of gets you out of that book slump. Now, this is a romantasy book. This is also has spice in it. It is an 18 and up book, but I always recommend this book for people who really enjoy fantasy and romance and want a fast-paced, easy to understand world. The world building is super easy to understand. The writing is fast-paced. Rebecca Yarros has a whole backlist. She kind of blew up for Fourth Wing, but she's a really well-established romance author, so she knows what she's doing. She's been writing for such a long time. It's a very simple world to understand, very simple rules and kind of magic system. So I always recommend reading Fourth Wing. Next, for a YA no spice fantasy recommendations, I always recommend Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This series, it is a trilogy, but talking about Once Upon a Broken Heart specifically because it is the first book, Stephanie Garber has amazing fantasy writing. It is a very simple and easy world to understand, a simple magic system. It's gonna keep you hooked. You're gonna fall in love with the characters. You're going to kind of understand everything that's going on. There's not a whole lot of things that make you kind of think about it. It's one of those books where you don't have to sit and kind of read in between the lines, which are always books that I recommend for people who are in book slumps. Kind of an easy and simple writing and not super lyrical, because that always grabs your attention and kind of moves the story along. Next, a great thriller book that I always recommend for people who are in book slumps, that kind of like that thriller horror genre, is Riley Sager's. Specifically, House Across the Lake is always the book I recommend. His writing is super fast. I personally did not guess the plot twist going on. Also, it was one of a plot twist that I've actually never read in any book ever, in any other thriller book, but it's fast-paced, it's short, sweet, to the point, past and present timeline, and you're following a really good story. There's the main mystery that's going on and a bunch of different sub-mysteries that you're kind of going through and working through. And I think his writing is amazing for people who want that simple kind of attention-grabbing book. Next in the thriller kind of mystery category is The Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Now, this is the first book. It is a series, but the thriller is contained to this book. So the actual mystery itself, you do reconcile in this book. So Jennifer Lynn Barnes, this is a YA thriller. Jennifer Lynn Barnes has amazing kind of storytelling and kind of that mystery, kind of like whodunit vibes. Again, writing is incredible to kind of grab your attention. And it does have a subplot of romance in this book. There is like a subplot of a love triangle, which is kind of the thing that goes throughout the series. But if you just want to focus on the mystery, The Naturals is always amazing. Next, we'll kind of get into a romance genre. If you love romances that have a lot of drama, a lot of gossip, a lot of tea, I definitely recommend Taylor Jenkins Reid, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. If you are on Book Talk or on Bookstagram or BookTube, you 100% have heard of this book. I think this book is incredibly amazing, especially it does do a great job of LGBTQ plus representation in this book, but it also has a lot of drama and gossip, and there's like a sub-mystery going on, and it's like you want to know more. You're constantly wanting to know more. You're like, no, keep going. Her writing also has it seem like you are watching a movie of what's going on. She paints the picture really well, but not getting too descriptive. I always recommend Emily Henry books, specifically Happy Place and Beach Read. You guys have definitely heard me talk about it, but if you've heard of Emily Henry, more than likely you've heard of Beach Read. So Beach Read, you are following two authors that are on a beach and they are spending the summer next door neighbors. Emily Henry's books are also kind of a literary women's fiction with romance too. There's a lot more going on than just the romance being the main plot of this book. There's a lot of other things going on. Emily Henry does have very poetic writing. So if you aren't a fan of poetic writing, I wouldn't recommend her, but she does have very poetic, quotable writing. Happy Place is kind of pulling at the fake dating trope. You are following Harriet and Wynne, who actually used to be engaged, but they broke it off. And the whole book is trying to figure out why they broke it off. They're staying at this house, this beach house, with all their friends, and their friends have no idea that they aren't engaged. So it's kind of discovering what happened, why they aren't engaged. But this also shows kind of what friendship is like, and friendship and kind of life once you hit 30s, and how to maintain adult friendships and making friends when you're an adult, because it's so much more different than when you're a kid making friends. And these are also perfect summer reads. If you guys are frequent watchers of this channel, y'all know what I'm about to show up, which is the Vancouver Storm series by Stephanie Archer. I nonstop talk about this series. I actually just got the physical copies of these books. All of her books are also on Kindle Unlimited. So if you don't want to do physical copies, her books are on Kindle Unlimited with the subscription. These are steamy romances. These books are super fast-paced writing. They are dual POVs. You have the girl and the guy, and this is an interconnected standalone series. Her writing is amazing. The next romance book I'm going to recommend is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Same thing with Emily Henry. Her writing is very poetic. She has kind of magical realism in her books, so they are mainly romance, but they have a hint of magic in them. This is actually my favorite book that I've read so far in 2024. It did come out last year, but you are following Clementine, and she lives, so in this book it is set place in New York City. When this book does focus a lot on grief, but it does talk about it in such a beautiful and kind of realistic way. Sometimes when it comes to grief in books, it's very brushed over and it's not talked about and how an actual person feels grief, and I feel like she handled this book super well. Lastly, but not least, I also always recommend Lauren Asher. Lauren Asher has amazing romance books. They are all on Kindle Unlimited, and I don't have any physical copies of her books, but I personally recommend the Throttled series, the Dirty Air series. That is a F1 racing interconnected standalone series. I always recommend Lauren Asher writing. Her writing is a bit steamier as well, but she has really good banter, and pretty much every romance author I've brought up, they all have incredibly good banter between the characters, which is always something that is important to me. But Lauren Asher's books is also incredible. They're fast-paced, they're dual POVs, and the romance, I like how she writes. Her male characters and her female characters both have a lot of depth to them. Sometimes I feel like in romance, the male characters aren't super fleshed out and aren't super focused on, but her male main characters always have a very detailed backstory. She always makes sure that both of her love interests have a backstory and are completely fleshed out before she writes them. And if you read books a lot, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Sometimes characters aren't completely fleshed out, but all of her characters are, and I absolutely love all of her romance books. Alrighty, everybody, so those are my how to get out of a book slump tips and book slump specific recommendations. You can also go to my official book recommendations video to see all the books I always recommend, but those are the ones that are kind of best when it comes to handling book slumps. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTuber stuff every YouTuber tells you guys how to do, and comment down below your personal book slump tips to maybe help some other book besties out. If you are in a book slump, I promise it gets better. You will get back to reading and you will love reading again, I promise. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.